Raja Ram Mohan Roy. This panel mainly is with Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. So let us start our panel number 2. So I'm so sorry, the chairperson, Dr. Sharup Prasad Ghosh, Director Machias, is absent because of his some very serious work. So let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Rita Bhattacharya. I am an Indologist and independent researcher, and I do social work. I am a social worker too. So now let us start with Rajarshi Chakraborty. He is Assistant Professor, Department of History, University of Bardhaman. His topic is Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, the frustrated humanist of Bengal Renaissance. So I'm really very much interested to listen to him because I thought he was very happy and satisfied. But in his Rajarshi's paper, he is a frustrated, very much frustrated, isn't it? I'm quote unquote humanist of Bengal Renaissance. So let us welcome Rajarshi. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, and a very good afternoon to all present. The title of my paper is Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, the frustrated humanist of Bengal Renaissance. Now, to start with, we can no way deny that Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was one of the brightest luminaries of 19th century Bengal Renaissance. Though there is a debate whether we can call it a Renaissance at all or not. But I think there is no debate as to the fact that Vidyasagar was really the greatest humanist. If there was a Renaissance, then we can't deny that he was the greatest humanist of that Renaissance. Now, the fact is that Rabindranath Tagore, he described Vidyasagar as a man of invincible manliness and incredible humanity. অজেয় পৌরুষ এবং অক্ষয় মনুষ্যত্ব. So this is how Rabindranath Tagore had described Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. But in spite of that, we see that the reforms Vidyasagar tried to bring about in 19th century Bengal were either very partially successful or were not successful at all. To begin with, we must remember that basically Vidyasagar was trying to uplift the condition of women in 19th century Bengal. His efforts were mainly to arrange for the remarriage of Hindu widows. His efforts were for the abolition of polygamy and also for the education of women. In the first issue, if we look at the first issue of widow remarriage, which Vidyasagar himself says that it was the greatest work of his life. Now, the shloka of Parashar Samhita, on the basis of which he claimed that the Hindu widows do have a right to remarry, was not actually discovered by him. It was discovered by the Derosians. But it was he who built up a huge movement. He was a very good organizer and an activist who pushed through this, pushed the government, the British government, to pass a law which will allow the remarriage of widows. In this, we know that he had to face immense problems because his adversaries were strong and very powerful in different ways. But how and why did the British government still pass the Widow Remarriage Act? Now, the British government, but the company's government at that time, they passed it for a specific purpose. I must point it out here. What was that specific purpose? They tried to prove that the British were in India with a very civilizing mission. They were here with a civilizing mission. And so what we see is that they didn't go into the Shastric interpretation of whether widows have the right to marry or not. They rather stick to the point that it is for giving the right to marry to those who wish to marry, who don't have that right. And when it was argued when the bill was being debated in the Legislative Council, Colville, what he said is very specific and particular. I will read it out from here. He said that it should be passed. This bill should be passed because of the sake of the English name. Not so much for whether it had Shastric sanction or not. That is not the main issue. The main issue is that it will prove that the British are on a civilizing mission in India, and Colville is specifically saying that the act would be wholly a dead letter. He would pass it for the sake of the English name. So we see that Vidyasagar's efforts in getting the government to pass this act did succeed. And we all know that after that, the first widow remarriage took place in 1856 at the Calcutta residence of Raj Krishna Banerjee, a very close friend of Vidyasagar, between Srish Chandra and Kalimati Devi. Now, the cost of the first marriage was 10,000 rupees, and most of it was borne by Vidyasagar. And one estimate says that of the 60 marriages that were organized, it cost Vidyasagar 82,000 rupees in those days, almost leading him to bankruptcy. And after all that, widow remarriage didn't become very popular among the upper castes, for which it was meant to be. So this success was limited. Vidyasagar had staked everything. He even risked his life. There were threats of his murder, as we know. But he got the government to pass the act. And even after the passing of the act, he took steps to get widows remarried. And in that process, we see that he is almost becoming bankrupt. what is interesting is that he is writing to his brother that if you ask, this was a village woman who was actually willing to get her widowed daughter married because she supposed that if she got her widowed daughter married, she will get quite a good, she would be able to make a good fortune because Vidyasagar will give her a lot of ornaments and that. And Vidyasagar is writing to his brother that please don't send this girl, this woman to me because people are trying to exploit Vidyasagar and take advantage of his munificence in the name of widowing. So this is what it boils down to. Now, as far as the other reforms are concerned, one of the root causes of girls becoming widows was certainly Kulinism or polygamy, which was very much prevalent in those days. And Vidyasagar, he petitioned the government in 1855 for the first time for the abolition of polygamy. But what we see is that the Bengal government didn't pass any law prohibiting polygamy. Why? The very reason for this is that in 1857 the Great Revolt took place and the British government became very conscious not to pass any laws that will affect the religious beliefs or the customs of the natives. So we see that when the government of Bengal, they appealed to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State very clearly said that don't go into these things that will in somehow displease the natives. And if you want to go into these things, you need to take the sanction of Her Majesty's government prior to bringing any such bill. So this shows that Vidyasagar, he was confused because the English thought it would give them the advantage of being shown as a civilizing mission. And next, when they faced the revolt of 1857, they just backed off. So this shows that Vidyasagar, he didn't get the support of the government in this case, though he knew very well that one of the basic reasons of child widowhood is Kulinism. So in this, Vidyasagar was a totally failure. And the government, to save its face, what did the government do? The Bengal government, they constituted a committee in which we see that there were H.T. Princer, C.P. Hobhouse, Satya Sharan Ghoshal, Digambor Mitra, Ramnath Thakur, and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. So, apart from Vidyasagar, the other three Hindu gentlemen, they said that Kulinism would gradually die a natural death with the progress of education. And what we see that Vidyasagar dissented, and in his dissenting note, he stated that a declaratory law might be passed without interfering with the liberty of the Hindus. Now, by law, pauses in the matter of marriage without hurting or without debarring schoolism, a declaratory law may be passed. But that was also not done by the government. So the government became very cautious. And Vidyasagar, in this case, he failed. He totally failed in this. Now, the third thing is that he was, like Ram Mohan Roy and others, he was in favor of women's education, and he was very pragmatic also in this respect. Now, he had opened schools in various districts of Bengal, as we all know, with the verbal assurance of the Lieutenant Governor of Bengal, then the Lieutenant Governor of Bengal, Lord Halliday. But the government didn't provide funds ultimately for the running of these schools. So when it comes to money, there is no civilization. If you have to give money, then there is no civilization. Then, and we see that though he was supported by Halliday, Gordon Young, the director of public instructions at that point of time, he said that he questioned the validity of these schools because educating girls will not help the colonial government in any after all. So, and not only that, Vidyasagar was not promoted to the post of the office of inspector of schools, and he was very disappointed, he was very frustrated, and he resigned from public service in 1858. So here we see that, and Halliday also didn't stand by his side. It was his rightful claim that he be appointed the inspector of schools, but he wasn't. So this is the things that we see that Vidyasagar tried. Vidyasagar tried but failed. Only in the case of widow remarriage he succeeded, but very partially. In the other matters, he failed badly. Now, let me last of all come to issue of child marriage and the age of consent fee. Now, here is a huge debate on the role of Vidyasagar regarding the issue of child marriage, and one of his first write-ups was on Balya Vivahe Dosh. It was one of his first writings. But when this issue came up, when the government tried to fix the age of marriage of girls at 12, Vidyasagar didn't support the government. He didn't come out in open support to the government, and at the far end of his life, he rather advised the government against in any way conflicting with any religious usage for fixing the age of consent as a measure of safeguard against child marriage. Now, this has led to a great controversy regarding the role of Vidyasagar. Some say that Buro Boyashe Bhimrat. So, but, and some of the Brahmins, they rejoiced that এতদিনে সুবুদ্ধির উদয় হয়েছে, এতদিন পর্যন্ত সব উল্টোপাল্টা কাজ করে গিয়েছেন, এবার তাহলে সুবুদ্ধির উদয় হয়েছে. So no wonder that the Hindu society was glad to find that Vidyasagar didn't fall into errors in his discussion on the age of consent bill, as had been on the occasion of Widow Remarriage Act or in Widow Remarriage Movement. So some even went so far as to fancy that it was his own conviction of his former errors that led him to oppose a bill interfering with the religious usage of the Hindus. আগে ভুল করেছেন এখন তার প্রায়শ্চিত্ত। So, but why? What was Vidyasagar's original standpoint? Why did he didn't support the government rather on this fixing of this age of marriage? Now, there was a survey at this point of time, a very simple survey, in which it was found that in this age of puberty, মেয়েরা রজস্বলা হচ্ছে 12 বছরেই, এরকম কোনো তথ্য উঠে আসছে না। কেউ 12 বছরে, some 12, some 13, some even 15, 16. So Vidyasagar took this stand from a very pragmatic viewpoint that why 12 should be that age. So, but no one understood Vidyasagar from this very physiological point of view. It was from a very physiological point of view that Vidyasagar didn't raise his voice against this bill, because there is no proof that the girls, they entered puberty at 12. So there was no such universal rule. So this was Vidyasagar. He had practiced homeopathy, as you know, he was a self-taught doctor in a sense, and he knew this. And so he didn't support the government. But as you see that the Hindus certainly rejoiced, his opponents certainly rejoiced in this, and some others said that Guru worship him. So now, so what we see is that Vidyasagar, in spite of his best efforts, in spite of his অজেয় পৌরুষ এবং অক্ষয় মনুষ্যত্ব, he failed in almost all the attempts he made, and that led him to seek solace among the noble savages, the Santals of Karnataka. So he very often used to go to Karmatar because he thought that the noble savages of that place will give him some solace. And he writes to his father, he very poignantly writes to his father that there are very few persons who are as wretched as I am myself. His father was then at Benares, and he wrote to his father that I have tried to do good to everybody, but ultimately I got the worst of everything. In his family life also, there is no time for that to discuss, but we all know in his family life also he was how much hurt and he was how much exploited. Let us not go into that. Let us stick to this point that he was rather used by the British government when it suited their interest and thrown out, or rather discarded when it didn't. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And really, but he was frustrated. Whatever he did, he united us. Because of Vidyasagar, we are here. We can speak, we can read, we can teach. So he did a lot for us. Number one. Number two, being a scholar, a student. I can say because of Vidyasagar in Bengal, Sanskrit was so popular at that time. Indian philosophy and Sanskrit. It was the heart of India because of Vidyapati. So he did a lot, definitely tried a lot. He was thinking of us. We are really indebted to him. So,
But how we treated, how remains outside that much of time.
that is another thing. But
So-
he was not, that is don't care. He did whatever he wanted to.
Yes, but at ultimately he became frustrated because he started going to Karmata, and at one point of time he even stopped going to Karmata.
Yes.
Because he ultimately felt that he was trying to help out the Santhals there,
Yes.
but the exploitation that was there on the Santhals by the British, by the landlords, by the Manikandas, couldn't do anything about it.
But so to me, it is open floor. To me, yes, what he is doing, what he is telling, that is in his view correct. But to me, the Ishachandra Vidyashagar was, I don't care whether you support me or not, I will do that. I have to fight for that. I have to do this.
So
So,
this was his spirit in the beginning, but at the end of his life, at the far end of his life,
because of his family afterwards, that is an issue. That we
yes.
discuss. But that certainty, when you are not getting any support from your family, or family is something
family
else.
is also expert. His brothers
Yes.
were also expert.
Yes, definitely. Then it is different, but whatever in this our uh, country, our state, or Bengalis, another state, or women, for Sanskrit, what he did, Pratusha, every morning they should serve.
Yes.
And he didn't care.
Can I add something?
Yes, sir.
Is it working? No.
Sir, please give it. So, no,
I won't.
no, giving this
No,
one.
I mean from where people get this back.
It has been discussed by a lot of persons in the traditional modernized by Congress party. Very
Yes.
clearly written there, you read Ashok Sen, the elusive milestones, Vidyashagar and these elusive milestones. The milestones very, it is what Ashok Sen is saying. So, and Vidyasagar's own writings, his own letters, speak a lot that show us how much frustrated he was because his writing, he stopped going uh, to his family house. He stopped. He almost had no relation with anybody because everyone was there to exploit him. He did stopped going to his family house. He stopped going to Karmatar after a point of time where he used to find solace because he said he knew that he couldn't do anything to remove the main cause of the sufferings of the Sanskrit. So ultimately, at the fag end of his life, what did he get?
And interpretation of our present.
My point is that is it frustration or he was feeling sad?
He was feeling sad to a point.
Yes. I don't feel he was frustrated. Frustration is something which I am
Negative comment.
yes, it's a negative that you're depressed, frustrated. And feeling sad is something which I feel that I want to do something, it is not accepted. And thereby what is happening is there is a insight that বলে অভিমান রয়ে গেল বুঝতে পেরেছেন না কিন্তু আমি little I have studied I have not found anywhere that was frustrated. This is my point. And that is why I'm asking because I really think again.
No, you read his letters to his father, to his brother, to his family. the letters he wrote, it is only sadness. It's only yes, he was sad. He was lonely. But wasn't there frustration expressed in this letter?
And that's the one thing. He under that positivism, he called us. He makes our purpose. Every he was really frustrated. That is why he wanted our freedom. And that is true. In that way, we all, our all forefathers in India, they were frustrated. That is true. In that way, you can say frustration. But Vidyasagar himself was never frustrated. He was very positive.
So, but he's writing to his father, and
He was very sad.
But he was sad. Because I discovered my father was an expert. Taking remote of Uttman and his contact with Thai and other his contact with the first expert in India. My house was in Calcutta.
Sir, first you introduce yourself.
My name is Professor Uttman. I teach in the University of Calcutta and I'm a lecturer at Thai at Calcutta. So his friend was Vasudha Chaudhary. And Vasudha Chaudhary, he wanted to do the role of Ram Mohan. But he was not getting that role. But when he got it, he came to my father, and then my father started hunting books and other things to help his friend. And then he discovered one book which is still in my house on Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, which has one of the steel engraving, only steel engraving of Vidyasagar, because he never sat for any audition or for photography or other. It is then only through this book I discovered, and I feel that it was sadness. You know, somebody, Raja Ram Mohan Rai also suffered from sadness. Huge amount of, and more than sadness, I think there is a pathos. There is pathos.
Yes.
মানে একবারে বুকটা একবারে
It is
ফেটে যাচ্ছে একবার, এটা আমি অ্যাকসেপ্ট করছে না, but frustration I have not. I mean, humbly I'm saying. I mean, I support her. I think it is not frustration because to say frustration, এটা কিরকম একটা এখান থেকে এখানে
ওনার মহত্ব, ওনার দিমাগটা আমাকে একটু
frustration.
সম্মানটা আমি কখনো পাইনি, যথারীতি এখন আমরা পেয়েছি।
না, কিন্তু frustration I will not tell that. We should.
Okay. Anyway, thank you.
That is my yes.
To me, it was a negative connotation, and some of our historians, they also writing the history in the way. Whenever I love history, that is why I read there. I don't want to utter this name because the life is going on. But I feel really sorry how they're thinking like this. They are educated, they are historians, they are writing books. If they are documented like that, if they are taking this word like this, so our next generation, what they will think, isn't it? So that is why, if you can, you please change the first. This negative connotation. Vidyasagar was beyond that at his time also. That is why Vidyasagar was Vidyasagar. Even today, he is Vidyasagar. Ours, not only mine, our humble pranam. Thank you. Now, Professor Ruth Harris. It is online. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me and see me well? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes. I
Oh,
can
wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to hopefully today talk to you about aspects of Vivekananda that you don't know much about. I'm talking about women, but mostly Western women, and also about his impact and reinterpretation of Guru Bhakti, the relationship between himself and his disciples. I'd also like to thank you all for inviting me because I'm really new to this world, but as well to explain that I still have COVID, so I'm a little bit tired. So we'll see how it goes. And I hope to be able to hear the questions because your audio is not as clear. Okay, so let me begin with the story of Vivekananda's triumphant intervention in the Chicago Parliament of Religion in 1893. And I'd say that this anecdote has almost a legendary quality, as does the tale of his subsequent progress and success in the West. But one of the things that always worried me when I wrote about this was, why did anyone in the West listen to him? What was his appeal? And here I want to begin to answer that very, very, very difficult question by focusing on his recreation in America of the guru-disciple relationship. I want to show how his teaching and example was part of a global preoccupation with the religious and scientific understanding of what was at the time variously known as rapport, suggestibility, therapeutic connection, or transference love, depending on the commentator. This focused on healers and subjects, analysts and analysans, and finally the guru and disciple. For those who sought something new, Vivekananda offered a vision of Vedanta that was both ancient and avant-garde, a universalism that was intensely idealist and yet in line with practical progressivism. He was unique and yet partook of the ambient currents surrounding the nature of self and consciousness that linked him to such spiritual pioneers as Mary Baker Eddy. You may not know her, but she invented Christian Science in America. And to men such as William James, Jean-Martin Charcot in France, and perhaps surprisingly, even Sigmund Freud. Now, before he could make a sustained impact, Vivekananda first needed to learn how to communicate, as while his command of English was impeccable, he knew little of what made America tick. And I'm now going to try and present to you a photo to show just how different this world was. Can you see a picture? There it is. Do you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, I don't know how many of you have seen this before, but of course, as usual, he's there in the center. You can see he's the only man who is not from New England itself. This is the first Greenacre. It's the year after the World Parliament. It's an attempting to recreate the world of the Parliament, but on a smaller scale and with very, very strong concerns with religious universalism. This woman, the one in the white hat on the right side, is Sarah Farmer. I'm now going to stop this. Well, I'll leave it for just a little bit longer because I think it gives a fantastic sense of how he creates himself very much with this extraordinary costume and how different he is from these dry New England Yankees who sit around him and are increasingly adoring. Now, what kind of people were they? These Greenacreites were interested in racial uplift, feminism, religious universalism, comparative religion, and often anti-imperialism. And this is an extraordinary rarity in this Western context. So we're talking about a world of alternative religion. What was interesting to them, is that evolutionary theory had destabilized their biblical convictions while they rejected the sin and hellfire of their parents. So they were in very much a liminal state in terms of their own spirituality. Especially after the horrors of the Civil War, they searched for more benign forms of self-understanding and visions of eternity, especially their view of heaven. They were enthralled by the new sciences of mind, emerging in psychology, anthropology, and so regarded Vivekananda's insights on perception, experience, and states of meditation as a spiritual and intellectual boon. Vivekananda admired their search, but pitied them for their lack of bhakti. And this is something he talks about all the time. We don't, the view of Vivekananda is just as Jnani is entirely wrong, especially in America. And he called their metaphysics stony and dry. Now, what you have to realize is he's emerging in a world where of Emersonian, with the Emersonian legacy, where they have a very strange but corrupted, but nonetheless definite sense of Indian thought through transcendentalism. And so these are the third generation after that. So they feel that they somehow know something about it. It's extraordinary how many of them had already read the Gita. Now, what it did for him at Greenacre was it solidified his realization of American women's spiritual and practical power. From his first sojourn in Massachusetts before the Parliament, he'd connected with women who had become his mentors and mothers, friends and sisters. In 1893, he wrote, "Your men I do not like. They are all for money, but your women, Lord bless them." From then on, their role was vital and their company pleasurable. In 1894, he remarked, quote, "I am a woman amongst women," and, quote, "closely associated with them in all their affairs." And what I find so fascinating about this remark is its words which make him sound much more like Ramakrishna than the man-making hero of Hindu nationalism that people talk about so much today. Even when he returned to India in 1897, he repeatedly proclaimed that he wanted to be reincarnated as an American woman. Now, can you see me now and hear me? Continue. Yes? You couldn't hear me. Yes?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. And yet this emphasis on the feminine was also about what a kind of global amalgam they made together. And what I want to emphasize is that Vivekananda worked with these women because these were his devotees, and his belief, which they shared, that women were intuitively spiritual. It also recast their vision of the saint-confessor relationship, so ubiquitous within Christianity, but which they felt they could readily grasp, albeit on very different terms. You must understand that they often saw Vivekananda as a way from departing from their Christianity and as a way back to it. Moreover, their conversation provided him with the clues he needed to connect. Sarah Farmer, the woman I showed you, was the organizer, and she impressed him with her directive, quote, "Never despise any rung of the ladder by which another is rising," a remark that resonated with the Gita's famous injunction, quote, "Whosoever comes to me through whatsoever form, I reach him," and both very different to the gospel injunction in John, "No one comes to the Father except through me," the quotation of Jesus saying that you must come through Jesus. And this was part of the universalism that he preached. This was part of the exclusivism against which he preached. Moreover, Farmer focused on culture, the idea of sowing a seed which would germinate if not thwarted by spiritual dearth. She was a Unitarian, the faith from which transcendentalism sprang, and Vivekananda repeatedly used notions of cultivation and husbandry to translate Hindu ideas of the Atman and the nature of spiritual eminence. And remember that the Unitarians, of course, had a very strong connection, both in Britain and America, with Ram Mohan Roy. He also met Sarah Bull at Greenacre, his mother of wisdom, or calm mother, as he called her, and also the woman who provided the funds for the construction of Belur Math. She was a wealthy cosmopolitan, equally at home in the New England establishment as in the bohemian world of artistic Europe. Like many others, she had turned to Babbitt's translation of the Dhammapada. Babbitt was a friend and colleague at Harvard, and Arnold's The Light of Asia, as well as Spiritualism and Emanuel Swedenborg. Swedenborg is vital, and one of the things he really did learn about when he was in America, much of the stuff he already knew about because he had learned about it in Calcutta. This Lutheran mystic had created an inclusive fraternity that bound together the life of everyone, quote, whether man, spirit, or angel, in what Swedenborg called the divine influx. Swedenborg also spoke of the breath as the central medium for, quote, communication between the body and the spirit, an idea that certainly prepared Sarah Bull for Vivekananda's teachings on the pranayama. Like all of Vivekananda's acolytes, she experimented with Mary Baker Eddy's Christian Science, America's burgeoning new creed, which saw humanity's suffering as nothing more than, quote, waking dream shadows, a description strikingly similar to the Maya of Vedanta. Eddy called on Christian Scientist operators to help patients marshal what she called their real selves, the spirit, so as to enter the kingdom of God immediately and not to wait, and thereby to lose the illusion of different egos in different bodies. In fact, even though he struggled against them in many ways, Vivekananda actually called Christian Scientists Vedantins. Thus, Vivekananda could tap into preoccupations that focused on, quote, the absolute mind and, quote, the infinite unity of consciousness that these creeds, including theosophy, encouraged. In most every case, these spiritual movements included techniques for healing and what was called self-realization, especially in Christian Science. By the way, the term self-realization was indeed Vivekananda's as well. They depended on enabling operators and spiritual guides to enhance beneficent states of consciousness. But this poses a real problem for us. If she could find so many of these ideas within Western traditions, why then did she turn to Vivekananda? It was here that his special way of transmitting notions of Guru Bhakti come into focus. It would take a whole other paper to explain how these American women reacted to whom they saw as a, quote, manly man who had a formidable intellect, but who nonetheless mothered them. For example, he would sit in the floor and grind spices, cook for them, and make rock candy to explain the meaning of bhakti. And they were astonished by this. They had never had a man cook for them. They certainly never saw a man grinding spices on the floor. And the making of the rock candy was the metaphor for sweetness. He was as far from the stereotype of an Indian sadhu as he was from the puritanical New England preacher of their experience. Vivekananda taught and listened, but also worked to heal Bull's rift with her daughter and gave her path and purpose. He named her Saint Sarah, a fount of discernment and practicality, and not dissimilar in these gifts, at least, to the greater saintliness of Sharada Devi, who they all met. I mean, Sarah Bull met Sharada Devi and kept a photograph of her in her meditation room in Boston. He opened spiritual possibilities, but offered a kind of love that she and the other women often spoke about as having never before experienced. Now, the next year he left Greenacre. Alas, I don't want to show you any more pictures, but he went to Thousand Island and only took a few devotees. Again, the women were talked of his enchanting qualities, the magic of his presence, the tenor of his voice, the turn of his head, the expression of his eyes. They focused on his hair and beauty, and this was a constant discussion about this unusual person that they were enchanted, literally enchanted by. When he went later to California and roomed in Pasadena with a group of single women, they listened at the door as he sang his morning prayers in Sanskrit. Alice Hansborough, one of the most devoted disciples there, was enthralled by his love of pancakes, the way he wound his turban, how he cooked curry, his, quote, baritone voice and sparkling eyes. And even 40 years later, as an elderly woman, she wrote, I can only describe myself as enchanted by him. Now, Indian devotees made very similar remarks about him. Of course, they were stripped of this Orientalism, but could more easily encompass their response in the concept of darshan, the propitious view of the holy person or deity, or gazing upon the adored one. They knew this emotion as religious and comprehended something of it from their culture. But for the American women, especially of Protestant heritage, it was a form of personal love, enchantment, etc. They used different words. Indeed, such emotions were often negatively associated in the West with the power of Catholic priests who had over women in the confessional. And it became a very important trope in literature in Georges du Maurier's 1894 work Trilby, in which the Jewish hypnotist Svengali manipulates the heroine. And of course, by 1911, there were already discussions of the seduction seductive qualities of Hindu gurus, which still remains part of the discussion in the West. Now, the women could not easily separate the personal and the impersonal, and they were very clear about it. And Vivekananda was aware of the difficulty and spoke long and often about the problems of allowing such personal love to overwhelm the process of transformation. He tried once at Thousand Island to explain how it worked. The real guru, he said, is the channel through which the spiritual current flows to us, the link which joins us to the whole spiritual world. Too much faith in personality produces weakness and idolatry, but intense love for the guru makes rapid growth possible. He connects us with the internal guru. Adore your guru if there be real truth in him. That guru bhakti will quickly lead you to the highest. Now, what is interesting was that he was their guide, teacher, friend, and bitter critic, all parts of the guru tradition, but a mixture unknown in America. However, he steered clear of any hint of the self-annihilating ecstasies of Ramakrishna, which he realized would be beyond their ability to comprehend. Indeed, he actually said that if he had behaved in any way like that, he would have been thrown into a ditch. Even when he insisted on obedience as the first step to liberation, this surrender was accompanied by encouraging his followers to question everything and to feel their own power. And in this regard, he really seems to have learned from Ramakrishna. For them, this was unaccustomed freedom, especially for the women, but he was also ready to devise unpleasant strategies to shift their preconceptions. Christine Greenstidel, who you may know as Sister Christine, who ultimately came to India and worked in Bagbazar, remembered how he blew cigarette smoke in her face to rid her of what he called chivalric notions and to show that what she saw as, quote, reverence for woman was nothing more than a gilded cage. Chivalry, she reported that he said, was nothing more than sex. At first appalled, she soon realized that his desire that she, quote, stand on her own 2 feet meant that she was to acquire a form of robustness, which in India, Vivekananda would praise as virility, and Margaret Noble in different terms as aggressive Hinduism. She wished to grow, but realized that the idea of Guru Bhakti was paradoxical, requiring a kind of submission that almost destroyed her sense of self. And this was very, very, very hard for the Westerners. The worst was when he scolded, as he did frequently, a torment that his female disciples from the West never accepted, unlike the monks in India. Nonetheless, his approach was effective. At Thousand Island, Christine felt freer than ever before. Quote, it is not difficult if one's devotion to the Guru was great enough, for then, like this snake, one dropped the old and put on the new. Margaret Noble, later Sister Nivedita, was also astonished by the intensity of this rapport. You may know the story of her early discipleship in Kashmir, how she perceived herself to be humiliated by his spiritual self-absorption in the Amarnath caves. Nor did he allow her in the early days of her training the freedom and play that Ramakrishna had allowed him, and which he had allowed his disciples at Greenacre. He was so harsh that the women who went with them had to intervene to stop his excesses. It was only later that he let her go more fully, and she always later recognized his respect for her intellectual quests. She admitted once that she could never really get rid of the personal and searched for words to describe the guru-disciple relationship. And she wrote to her friend Josephine, I think perhaps the whole of one's nature comes out in that relationship, the bad as well as the good, and no one else matters very much. Probably this is always so with the guru. I am willing to admit, after all, that one's love for Swami is sadly, quote, personal. If you will let me claim that it is at the same time, in some ways, the most impersonal thing of which one is capable. And when she used the word impersonal, she puts it in italics. These words capture a larger insight, reflecting in developing ideas of the unconscious that went to the heart of psychoanalytic visions of transference and countertransference. And this is where I would like to open it up now and get you to think about Vivekananda's contributions to all kinds of relational thinking that emerges in exactly the same time. And I think that in the West, people have not understood how important it was. Vivekananda's appeal was grounded in these understandings and emerged alongside a remarkable body of other work focusing on the nature of the self. Both similarities and differences are hard to avoid because all appeared almost simultaneously. Raja Yoga was finally translated in 1896, though it was done at least 18 months earlier. Freud's studies on hysteria in 1895, and William James's Varieties of Religious Experience in 1902. In this context, James was particularly important because he was not only a friend, well, an acquaintance of Vivekananda, but friends with many of the Greenacreites. And it was through him that they received their education and a new theoretical framework in psychology. James was interested not only in the mystic's experience of connection with the divine, but also concerned with every aspect of possible mental healing, both as investigator and as subject. As you may know, he suffered from a suicidal neurasthenia and hence had also felt himself cured, which is why, even though he worked so much in psychical research, even though it was considered by many more cautious colleagues as almost a betrayal. Although the three men held differing views of religion and mystical experience, they all worked within a global context that reinterpreted the self through their investigations of relationship, rapport, connection, and its relationship to new sciences of mind. Freud first encountered this in Paris with Jean-Martin Charcot when he observed hypnosis, and he thus experienced forms of mind cure without the religious underlay of Christian science, and was fascinated by the ways subjects surrendered their will during suggestive therapy. But he was a poor hypnotist himself, and instead developed the talking cure as replacement, which is what we get in the studies in hysteria. In this, the analysts hid away, leaving the subject to concentrate on their own thoughts, projecting their fantasies onto the now invisible analyst, hidden from the patient's view. And what I think is interesting about Freud is he recognized how important the visual was, and he wanted to contain that. What in India is called darshan, he thought that was almost too much. And when he first wrote about transference, he was disconcerted by it. And he actually looked at it as kind of contracting the disease of love, hence why he sought to impose so many boundaries on its libidinous power. Like Charcot, William James Vivekananda, his most successful encounters were with women, bourgeois, largely Jewish paying clients in this case, very different to the poor of Charcot's clinic or the genteel spiritual seekers who flocked to Vivekananda in New England. They all paid attention to women, though, in their distinctive ways, but Vivekananda was remarkable because of the Indian context from which he came, which prescribed such proximity. It would probably never have occurred to him to experiment in this way in India, I think. So on that, I would appreciate your views. But the differences amongst these therapies were as important as the similarities. Obviously, as I suggest, in psychoanalysis, the visual was dangerous, as practitioners might distract clients with their emotions. Freud instead emphasized the process of confiding, free associating, and fantasizing to catalyze the transference that forced therapeutic regression. Another part of the contract was not to promise too much. Psychoanalysis did not offer transformation, but only what he called, quote, ordinary unhappiness. In contrast, Vivekananda refused all payment and resisted Western liberal notions of the contracting self, nor did he hide himself away, but rather encouraged exchange, permitting disciples to comfort and amuse him in ways that would have horrified Freud. Equally, he scolded and disciplined in ways that would get his psychoanalysis struck off. Having experienced the heady spiritual passion of Guru Bhakti with Ramakrishna, Vivekananda revered its capacity to transform. Rather than regulated professional treatment, the relationship worked, and I put that in inverted commas, because the guru became more than family, allowing a protected place for emotional release and psychological creativity. Now, if like Freud, Vivekananda had no faith in miraculous display, he still wanted more than ordinary unhappiness. He sought the bliss of detachment and engagement without erotic desire for any return. He remained on a metaphysical quest for union with the divine, while Freud's atheism dismissed such hopes as illusion. Moreover, there was no parallel between Freud's dynamic unconscious and Vivekananda's vision of superconsciousness, grasped through Advaita and the techniques of yoga. The former sought to excavate the unconscious, whereas the latter hoped to soar above consciousness. But despite the many differences, both connections were based on this transnational preoccupation with rapport or connection between individuals, with a similar scope for misunderstanding and disappointment. And yet, Vivekananda revealed a remarkable intuitive sense when he transposed Guru Bhakti into a different American idiom. In adapting Ramakrishna's teaching on universalism, he strove to speak in, quote, their own language, and so how their Protestant self-divinizing traditions and mind cure practices might be poured into an Advaitic vessel. But as an Indian guru, he also realized how important an engaged and attentive human presence was to the process of achieving self-realization. Vivekananda's Hindu universalism thus had an abiding impact on American spiritual culture and on the global history of ideas that is yet to be fully appreciated. Thank you very much.
Vivekananda Ramakrishna, and I understand.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
So thank you so much, and be with us. It's wonderful. Thank you. Because of shortage of time, we are not going for the question answer because another speaker, online speaker, is waiting for us. We are going to hear that. Thank you so much. Our next speaker, actually he was our first speaker, Sambit Pal, Associate Professor and Head of the Department, Broadcasting Department, International School of Broadcasting and Journalism, MIT AGT University, Pune. He is also speak on Vidyasagar's journalistic pursuit, a reflection of his ideas of amalgamating the tradition with very interesting topic. So, sir, Dr. Sambit Pal, please, Professor Sambit Pal, the floor is yours. You please start. And we are running a shortage of time. So, can I request you to present your paper within 10 minutes? If you don't mind, please write within 10 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. Yes.
We are hearing you clearly.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll keep it very short, and because it has already been deliberated, and we all know about the Ishachandra Vidyasagar, and then we heard about.
So we were waiting for you a long time. After that, we are starting because you were the first speaker after that. So we were waiting for you, but I don't know something happened. So please, within 10 minutes.
Yeah, sure. So very quickly, you have already told the audience about today's topic that I'm going to present about is Vidyasagar's journalistic pursuit, a reflection of his ideas of amalgamating the tradition with modernity. The social context of Bengal Renaissance, we know that there are a lot of debates whether it was Renaissance, whether it was just awakening of Bengal intellectuals, and whether it could or couldn't reach out to the masses, to the minorities of Bengal at that time, and all these things. That is a matter of debate. And that's something that we can discuss later in a bigger way. But the thing is that we need to understand in what context Vidyasagar had actually started his journey in terms of his social reforms, educational reforms in Bengal, and also has been part of this Bengal Renaissance, what we call it. So the company rule was there from 1757. Traditional Orthodox society was there very much, and exploitation of the farmers, influence of Western thoughts, Western influence education system. So all these were at play at the time. And Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar's background, if you look at it, that he had experienced poverty. He was educated in Sanskrit college with emphasis on Sanskrit language and literature. He worked in Fort William College and Sanskrit College under the very strict administration of the Englishmen, and he did not go abroad, unlike other people, like other great men like Ram Mohan or Vivekananda. He did not go outside India. He was very much rooted to Bengal, and very much rooted to tradition. Now, his focus of his life was very clear, that education and academic administration, social reforms, development of language, publication, and of course, philanthropy, and why we call him Karuna Sagar, Vidyasagar. Now, is Vidyasagar a journalist? That's the biggest question. Uh, at that time when Vidyasagar was active from say about 1835 40 onwards, at that time Bengali journalism or journalism in Bengal was in full force. It started in 1780 with Hickey's Bengal Gazette. Then Ram Mohan Roy had taken initiative and launched his newspapers. Sirampur missionaries had also tried to launch newspapers, and journalism or newspapers was of course a tool for advocacy. If it was not so much so in the time of Bengal Gazette or Calcutta Journal by Buckingham, but when this Bengal Renaissance thoughts started coming in Bengal with Ram Mohan, the newspapers and journal, whatever you call it, was of course a tool for advocacy, be it for missionaries or be it for people like Ram Mohan. And there were a lot of newspapers and journals that were there. Now, Vidyasagar was not a journalist in the real sense of the term. He did not directly edit any journal or newspapers, but still he was very actively involved in publications and editorial jobs of the newspapers, and he had promoted a lot of newspapers, and he had used it as a vehicle to preach his thoughts and garner social support. So these are mainly three newspapers: Tattvabodhini Potrika, Som Prakash, and Hindu Patriot, with which Vidyasagar was attached to. And there was another another journal called Shubhakari Potrika. He was part of that as well. Now, he did not edit any one of them. He did not work as a journalist in that sense. But a very similar thing happens after, after about 50, 60 years from Vidyasagar's time, that how Gandhiji had used the journals he had edited to preach his thought, and that had a very logical flow, starting from Indian Opinion when he was in South Africa, then Young India, he's preaching about Satyagraha there, Navjivan, and then Harijan. At the end of his life, Gandhiji is talking about untouchability and about the Harijans. Similarly, in Vidyasagar's, there is no connection between the two. But what I have found as a journalist and also as a media educator, that Vidyasagar also had that kind of logical transition in his life, as and when he was associated with any newspaper or journal, be it Tattvabodhini Potrika, where he's writing about Bengali literature. His Mahabharat was translated by him, and it was published there. Shortboy Shubhakari, he's writing about child marriage and female education. Som Prakash is when the Widow Remarriage Act has been passed, but it was of course part of that movement in the initial period when this act was passed and it was declared as law. And at that time also, Som Prakash is writing about awakening of people of Bengal against indigo, farmers, against the indigo plantation and all. And Hindu Patriot is, of course, as we know, and also Som Prakash, they were very much liberal in their thoughts, and they were probably the beginning of the nationalism or national movement that India witnessed in the decades, in few decades later. Now, in Tattvabodhini Patrika, it was not news-based journal, published in 1843, mouthpiece of Tattvabodhini Sabha, and it was basically, launched for reformation of religion and to reach out those people who, who share the same views with Tattvabodhini Sabha, which were consisted of the Brahmas there. And it, of course, later it captured economic and political thought of the time as well. Now, this is very interesting that Vidyasagar did not convert into Brahmanism, or Brahmo Samaj. He did not join Brahmo Samaj, or neither he was very religious in the traditional sense of the term, but he was part of Tattvabodhini Patrika. He was part of the paper committee. He edited the editor of Tattvabodhini Patrika, Akshay Kumar Datta's pieces, and Vidyasagar published the translation of Mahabharata in Tattvabodhini Patrika, and also wrote on widow remarriage. So he basically, even though he did not join the Sabha or Brahma Samaj in that way, he was very much part of this journal, and he used it to propagate his views and to create public opinion, probably because at the time when Tattvabodhini Patrika was in circulation, he was very much with Sanskrit College, and he was trying to reform the whole educational system of Sanskrit College, trying to make it more, more easier. It was trying to make it easier for the Bengalis and Bengali Hindus, and at the same time, he tried to teach Sanskrit through Bengali. So that was the kind of initiative he was taking. He was reforming the language, and he had used this journal at that time. In Sharpa Shubhakari Patrika, which is being published sometime around 1850, he wrote on female education, and he was very much, as we know, that he was very much into spreading female education, opening schools for women, and he traveled, in South Bengal in districts and started schools and all. So at that period, he is using Sharpa Shubhakari Patrika to express his view. And at the same time, he's also writing about child marriage. Balya Bivaher Dosh is one, article that was published and that was written by Vidyasagar. Now, he was again not the editor. Matilal Chattopadhyay was the editor, but Vidyasagar had supported, as Madan Mohan Tarkalankar was with him, and they supported this journal, which was short-lived in a way also. Now, Shom Prakash, and this is very interesting that probably when Shom Prakash was published, and it is written in many texts which was written around that time, that Vidyasagar actually wanted to help a deaf Pandit. I think his name was Sharuda Prasad. And to support his expenses and support him, he wanted to start this particular journal, but it turned out to be a vehicle for thoughts around nationalism and awakening the riots and against the Jamindars. And Dwarkanath Vidyabhushan was the editor, and it is said that Vidyasagar actually asked him to start this particular newspaper, and Vidyasagar was very supportive of this. Now you can see the change that is happening. That when he was with Tattvabodhini Patrika, he was talking about languages. He was talking about the reformation of Bengali languages, about child marriage, about widow remarriage, and stuff like that. But when Shom Prakash came into play, the things are changing, and he's actively supporting this newspaper, even though he's not editing. And it is going into the phase where the riots are being awakened. The indigo farmers were in suffering, and Shom Prakash was a vehicle for nationalism, as I said, and it was liberal. It was a kind of amalgamation of both Hinduism, Brahmo Samaj idea, and also liberal in many sense. And it later in about 1885, when National Congress was formed, it also supported that. So Shom Prakash was very much into play in garnering support for nationalism, and as we know that after 1857, it was actually growing quite actively in the Bengali intelligentsia, the thoughts of nationalism and all. And Bideshko wrote about education through, how education is important when it is imparted through mother tongue, and he's also keeping on writing on widow remarriage there. Hindu Patriot, this was again the philanthropist Vidyasagar came into play when Harish Chandra Mukherjee, the editor of Hindu Patriot, had passed away. Then to support his family, Vidyasagar actually arranged everything. He asked Kaliprashanna Singh to buy the press and asked Krishnadas Pal to edit this particular newspaper. And as we know that it was very much nationalist in nature and supported the Indigo movement, and later, as the name suggests, that it was part of the patriotic movement in India. So contribution to Bengali journalism, as far as Vidyasagar is concerned, that he, as I said, that he was not a journalist in real term, but he promoted journalism in Bengali, used the medium to garner support and awareness among the elite Bengalis probably, but as we see that if we read through those newspapers and journals, that a lot of letters used to come from the districts as well. Just it was just not confined to Calcutta. It used to come, but there are of course criticism and some suspicion that if the editors used to write those letters or not. But these newspapers that Vidyasagar was associated with had played a great role as far as awakening the people of Bengal on the issues, as I mentioned earlier, about female education, child marriage, widow remarriage act, and reformation of Bengali language as well. So, as I said, that as he progressed in his life, his thoughts had changed, or rather, focus had changed, and he had used this newspaper to express his thought, or at least support the people who were supportive of his thoughts or shared his ideas. So that's not all from me. Thank you so much. I hope I could.
Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation, and really, really whatever you spoke is very clear to everybody. Your presentation is very good. And can we ask anybody if anybody wants to ask any question? This is now open floor. If anybody asks any question to anyone, already waiting on open floor already, because we are waiting for you. So these two speakers, online speakers are there. Do you want to ask any question to any of them? Do you want to ask any question to any of them online speakers? So, okay, thank you. Everybody understood everything, and everyone is accepting whatever you say, and they understand very well. Thank you, everybody, for this wonderful session. And Pandit Isha Chandra Vidyasagar and Vivekananda, both are really our pathfinder and our essence. So thank you everybody for their nice presentation. Now it should be tea break for another session. If I will request this floor, tea break means again you have to go down, you have to waste at least half an hour or 20 minutes. So can we continue?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. So this panel 3, this comes up. First, I wish to call upon Chairperson Shukriyo Sen.
Oh, he's not there. I'm here.
Oh, you are chair. Oh, yes, please come. I'm so happy.
Thank
So, sir is here already. So, please come. Yes. So, I'm handing over to Sir Alok Kumar. This is the panel 3, Humanism and Hope. So, the legacy of Tufik Ray in cinema and the art history of Bengal Renaissance.
It will be a wonderful session, no doubt about it. And Shotamjit Rai is always in our heart. So we are really, really happy to have this session. And Sir Alok Kumar is with us. We are really feeling honored. And I'm handing over this mic to Sir Alok Kumar.
We have the lights, please. And we have the lights. First is Shekhar, can you come here? अच्छा, my sir, my sincere apologies. आपने टॉपिक नहीं दी इसमें, कोई टॉपिक नहीं दिए जो फ्रस्ट्रेटेड देखा हुई. So my sincere apologies whatever I did. I'm saying because the topic is like that, because he could have turned it also, saying that it was not frustrated. I just so my sincere apologies. I need to just look on the topic, but I will take it from you. Shekhar, can you come a little bit here? Who is the other speakers, please? And we,
let me call upon all the speakers. And Devadatta Gupta.
I mean, they can.
What?
That's work of campus. The other speakers, are they here? Yeah. You are here. You are. Please name, please. Guys, where's Devdatta Gupta? Devdatta Gupta. Okay. We have Aniruddha. Thank you. Thank you. Acha, we have. Then we have but no. So but just let us share it out. We have 3 speakers here. We will start with Shekhar, okay, and then we will go to you, all of you. Then I will come back to me if there is time. I will share my paper. Otherwise, I think we will. I think it's important to hear the young.
Something says.
I'll be very honest with you.
Huh.
What I can say is that it is written over there, like mentioned over there. My name is Professor Alok Kumar. I came into academics very lately. I started my career in advertising, and then I for very long. I launched Telegraph, Shannon, all this I launched. Then I wanted to be an academic all my life. I left everything. I left corporate life just to become an academic. I went back to my institute, IIM. I did the research fellowship. I did my doctorate, and I joined academics. That is how I came into academics. And I have been teaching for some time, even abroad. Interesting is because since I've been in media and other places, I teach with a lot of case study. And this year itself, in IIM, I'm teaching with failure studies, my own failures. Ravivar was a magazine failed, New Delhi, Bhumilokki, Anandabazar failure. I am teaching failure study this year because it's become a big success. My father was an antiquarian. I knew Shotamjit Rai from this thing, but not something which I have never seen him as a very big, large character. Because my father used to give me books and other things to go and give it to him. I was an errand boy, and I used to hate the job. When my father I used to play football after coming back from school. My father would call me and give me 24 paise and say that you go in Galaxy and to Manikaka. I used to hate it, but now I know what an important work I did. And through these books only, I had a relation with Shotamjit. Only through these books. I have my own diary, which I have from class 6. I have written on Shotamjit Rai, which I have not published like other people. Everybody is writing. I have not published my work. I am not a published poet. I am not an author. I hate publishing books, but I love teaching. Okay, so that is what I am. If you go to Shekhar, I know him for time. He's a filmmaker. He's an author. He's teaching currently at the Film Institute. And I like this because everybody at one point of time, if they come back to teaching, it's a big thing. You give back something. So with you, I start. Please, if you could deliberate on this and take off. That was the exposure culture.
Very much. Hello. Yes, we are very long time friends. We'll talk about it. Well, so many things are happening around, and I started laughing when one of the publishers asked me 6 months back, "Why did you do a book of poetry?" I just laughed for hours. Is that easy? You mean? So many things have been discussed. If it isn't easy, because I know when I went to the book fair, plenty of books are flying around. Like me. I also had my personal touches with him. I visited him. We both were in Chitipani. He was one of the directors and advisors. Anyway. So I've just summed it up because I know the time constraints would be, I'm sure. And I agree with the president. I'd love to listen to the younger generation more than us. Okay? So I start. The president on the dais, the fellow panelists and friends, good afternoon. We have assembled here at a time when the world's humanity sharply divided in their opinion on the war that is going on for the last 4 months in Europe. And often our civilization will be destroyed by the use of nuclear powers. The war has become an almost regular exercise in that continent, which claims to be the first. One wonders where have all the great values of Europe and Renaissance gone. Perhaps a trace of it can only be seen in the Sistine Chapel of the Vatican City or the Museum of Louvre in Paris. But recently, the great creation of Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa is not spared. Someone tried to add some color with the cake, Mona Lisa. And what about my country? We are a little better. The answer would be in the negative. Those ideas of secularism, individualism, humanism, rationalism, skepticism are the significant virtues of the Bengal Renaissance that reaffirm the identity of the great nation and the guiding principles of creating free and modern India. Unfortunately, these values are undermined. I thank organizers profusely for convening this seminar on this momentous occasion of 250th year of celebration of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, father of Bengal Renaissance, as this is the need of the hour to revisit the time and rekindle the values of Renaissance. Our subject is cinema and the legacy of the great filmmaker Satyajit Ray in the context of second part of the Bengal Renaissance, or perhaps in the context of the post-Rabindranath era. Satyajit Ray, or Rai, can easily be connected to the cultural history of the Bengal Renaissance. As a matter of fact, he is a child of Bengal Renaissance. Like his grandfather, 2 years junior to Rabindranath Tagore, Upendra Kishore Rai Chaudhary, an accomplished musician of Western classical music, graphic artist, composer of songs, scientist, a writer of children's stories, was an activist of Reformation. He also launched the children's magazine, monthly magazine, Prashantosh, which was succeeded by Satyajit's father, Shukmar. Another genius of high school, short-lived, but he was also an original thinker, an active participant in the Brahmo Revolution. A fascinating fact about this children's magazine had been that the family members were the contributors and the women members of the family were not discriminated against. They were regular contributors to the magazine and later they became members of the group. This reminds us that women's education was a major issue in the Bengal Renaissance. Satyajit Ray inherited all the great qualities of his ancestors. No wonder, being a member of such an enlightened family, Satyajit, a multifaceted talent, would also inherit the urge to contribute to the creative field. But how many Renaissance men were able to maintain more or less the same level of excellence in everything that should be able to do? He's the last Bengali Renaissance man. Satyajit Ray's creative path in filmmaking lasted for 37 years. His decision to take up the art of cinema for self-expression completed the circle which was started by his grandfather. Because being an Indian, he wanted to concentrate on and contribute his original creative thoughts to a modern art form. To the youngest of all art forms, cinema attracted him most. Though it was a difficult choice, he plunged into it. Here the art meets the science of vice versa. Cinema also uses the basic concepts of other art space, narrative, other art space, narrative, story, framing, composition, music, and all blended into a single form, guided by certain principles. This suited his creative personality. The first film, Pather Panchali, was a game changer in India. It had broken free of the conventions of Hollywood and Indian cinema that were in vogue. Pather Panchali also reflected the creator's enormous preparation before getting into the art form and remarkable understanding of all the elements of cinema that made it to a most potent art. The film inspired his contemporaries who created their styles in cinema and put Bengal once again as a trendsetter in the field of new cinema. Much has been discussed on this first and the subsequent films. In this limited time, I would prefer to deal with the ideological principles that guided his films. Starting from Pather Panchali, Satyajit Ray completed 36 films, of which 28 were feature films. He was celebrated as a humanist. His focus on individuals was humanistic and occasionally criticized, as if he consciously created distance from politics or ideology. As a filmmaker, I find that Satyajit's ideology is more complex and nuanced and cannot be comprehended by a defined or rough definition of humanism. His views suggest that he created a distinct ideological. If he concentrated on his works for the first decade, he would observe that the timeless lyrical style of Pather Panchali told us transcended the deep poverty in rural India, but Durga's death sums up the tragedy of struggling life. It is true to the image documentation of rural life. The train, of course, plays an integral role in the trilogy. Sometimes the dream of a child being transported to an unknown land, then a symbol of technological progress, and Chip would have liked to see reference Cherry Orchard. Then slowly it is integrated into daily life, or remains as a space, if not as reminders of old memories. In his second film, Aparajita, Satyajit was much more confident and learned to take more control over the content and the text. Hence, we find more Satyajit in a sense screenplay than the original version. Opu loses slowly his interest in the train when he gets a taste of the knowledge. He's introduced to the world of science, and whatever he learns in the school, he shares with his mother. The concept of sharing of knowledge internationally. Opu becomes obsessive with the globe that his teacher gifted him, as if he's carrying the universe in his hand. He's drawn from the village to the larger world of the city, Kolkata Pulsar. In the story, Vibhuti Bhushan repeatedly mentions Opu's extraordinary quest for knowledge. This globe sums up all. It is a significant addition by the director. The trilogy indeed ends in hope when Opu takes his son Kajol away with him to Kolkata. Vibhuti Bhushan took Kajol back to the village again, but Satyajit shows no interest. Progress means looking forward, not turning back to the past. Between Pather Panchali and Opu Shamshad, Satyajit Ray made two more very interesting films, Parush Pathor and Jalsaghar. Jalsaghar Music Room is a study on the rise of Gurju and fall of a music-loving land, Pune. The landlord ignores his debts and pawns his possessions so that he can still pretend to live in an aristocratic style. In this film, Satyajit apparently sympathizes with the past and with the time. This film is considered to be the most Chekhovian of all his films, because like Chekhov's great plays, here he portrays the conflict between the old world and the new world. But the difference with Chekhov is that Satyajit takes the side of the old world and projects the good world deliberately negative and unfun. So, on close scrutiny, we see that the landowner not only developed refined tastes, but is a big-hearted person who in the past gave shelters to thousands when there was a deluge in the age. George Chagall faced negative criticism from a section of the critics, found Satyajit's worldview to be reactionary. JB again was set in the upper class environment. The film attacked religious dogmatism. And some controversies erupted again because few felt it attacked Hindu practices. However, this time the director is severe and punishes those people hard for indulging in that faith. In Mohanagar, Satyajit changed the original end of the story and give an optimistic end in this film, just as he rejected Vibhuti Bhushan descriptions of his first reaction after he received his mother's death. So by and large, in the first decade of his works, he was full of hope. But then the great artists recognized the bad result. Being a highly sensitive observer of society, he reacted to the radical changes in the socio-political scenario of the country in the late 60s and 70s. We see his anxiety and skepticism in the city trilogy. The young man in the film Kanchenjunga feels proud refusing the job offered by the industry is under pressure. But in John Oren, the hero takes his best friend's sister for snatching an order. At the end of Charulata, Satyajit did not give any final verdict, but kept the option open, perhaps for future reconciliation, which apparently has broken. Whereas Tagore titled the story is Broken Nest. The story ends as Charu says, let it be. Charu suffers, but no sign of her guilt is evident when involved in an extramarital relationship. But in Horebai, Satyajit becomes ruthless again by killing Nikhilesh in the clash. Is this to symbolize the death of liberalism in our country? Or following the rules of tragedy, he cautions us against the irrational destructive forces. Though Tagore maintains his idea of humanism, keeping scope for the future of the couple, leaving behind severely injured Nikhilesh. Perhaps he was concerned about Bimola, whom he offered a new life by getting her out from the home to the world. Satyajit shows no concern for widowed Bimola, perhaps because she is now more mature intellectually to tackle the existential crisis. Was Satyajit compelled by the circumstances to become more political than his mentor Rabindranath Tagore? It is evident in his later works that Satyajit became more and more disturbed by corruption and moral degradation of society. Perhaps he was enjoying more making films targeted mainly to children, which also thrill the adult, a unique concept of the narrative he developed. But those films are entertaining, but not without a message. In Ganeshatru, Satyajit's huge optimism returns. Henry Gibson's play is against that compact liberal majority and ends on an individualist note. Quote, the strongest man in the world is he who stands most alone. But Satyajit changed it to a kind of a socialist end, trusted in collective action, and that too by the youth of the society. Doctor, in the end, discovers that he is not alone. Satyajit Ray's idea of nationalism might have dented considerably, but his lifelong faith in rationalism, science, secularism, and individualism remain intact. Finally, a few words or two about his swan song, Agun. In this fascinating chamber cinema, Satyajit attacks modern civilization rather vitriolically. And that reminds us of Gurudev Rabindranath's last testament, The Crisis in Civilization, where he expressed his unabashed anguish against, quote, demon of barbarity, ready to tear up humanity and orgy of the speech. Satyajit's protagonist goes to Shantiniketan, but not in the university, but the tribal's heart. These tribes fought against the British much before anybody in India. Like Gurudev, Satyajit Roy, too, does not want to commit the grievous sin of losing faith in man. What fascinates me about this film is that it reminds me of Opu's headmaster of the high school, who offered him a globe and important books for visitor. Here, Avantuk, when returns back to his pursuit, advised the child of the house not to be a Kukumuntu, the frog in a well. This somehow sums up Satyajit Ray's humanism and hope.
Hollywood.
Can I say?
Yes, yes.
I just want to say this show after the seminar, we have to have on.
Yes,
Okay.
actually.
Sorry, President.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello. Yes. I found out.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Achutana Shankar. I have been
It's my language.
and also thanks to everyone who has given me the opportunity. Here I present a paper on Shri. The best creator of Indian cinema, Bharat Shri was born on 2nd May in Calcutta to denominate the relationship. Mr. Ray studied relevance government in Calcutta and completed his graduation in economics at Presidential College. He always interested in fine arts, so he took admission at Vishwabharati in Shanti. Mr. Ray's working life started on 1943 at EJKMA, a British advertising agency, as a junior visualizer and earning 8 rupees income. He has established Indian cinema on foot of honor and excellence in the world. Not only that, he has elevated Bengal film to the extreme stage of modernity. He is one of the greatest filmmakers of the 20th century. Bengalis got the first opportunity to watch color movies from black and white only for him, Kanchanjunga. Was the first Bengali color film and probably the first Indian ancestral film also. He has been honored with many awards for his talent. His early movies with him are exclusively related with the marginal and rural poor of Bengal, unemployed life of Bengal. In his next film, we get to see the life of urban middle class Bengalis, their economic condition, and their entry into the modern world. He portrayed in his next film the new economic pressure of Bengal in post-independence of India, and it had a great impact on the middle class community of Bengal in Calcutta. As a result of the situation, middle class families are struggling to meet the financial needs of the family. To solve that problem, both men and women have to work outside government marketplaces. As a result, modernity comes in the life of middle class women of Bengal. The paper highlights on and reality subjectivity of working in a limited space culture, history, and the dynamics of film in an ever-changing world. Satyajit Ray is an Indian filmmaker and a great master of world cinema, known for his humanistic approach to cinema. Ray was a multifaceted creative person. He is India's only renowned filmmaker. His family stricken in Bengali arts and letters for 15 generations. His grandfather was Bindu Kishore Rai Chaudhuri and father was a great poet, Sukumar. So there is no doubt that he will not do anything for the society by becoming a single example of his dynasty. His father, Sukumar Ray, passed away when he was only 3 years old. His mother, Shukurva Devi, little income son, kept the family going. His film demonstrate a remarkable humanism, elaborate observation, and subtle handling of characters of situation. He developed a cinematic style that is almost invisible. He strongly believes that the best technique is the one that's not noticed. He made his film in Bengali, a language spoken in West Bengal state. Yeah. And yet, his films are the subject of universal interest. The Oku trilogy comprises 3 Bengali films directed by Satyajit Ray, Pather Panchali 1955, Aparajita 1956, and The World of Oku 1959. They are frequently listed among the greatest films of all time and are often cited as the greatest movies in the history of Indian cinema. The original music for the film's first trilogy of all time, as Roger Ebert later pointed out, the 3 films reached the top prizes at Cannes, Venice, and London, and created a new cinema of India whose productive film industry has traditionally stayed within the narrow confines of plot-hacking musical instruments. Never before had one man had such a decisive impact on the films of his study. His films are about the things that make up the human race: relationships, emotions, struggles, conflicts, joys, and sorrows. The famous Hollywood director Martin Scorsese said, "The film opened my mind and inspired me, and I know that he did the same to others." Across the board, filmmakers such as James Ivory, Abbas Kiarostami, Philip Kaufman, Isao Takahata, Elia Kazan, Wes Anderson, Carlos Saura, and Danny Boyle have been influenced by the Oku trilogy, with many others such as Akira Kurosawa praising the work. The ending of Satyajit Ray's film is mostly a symbol of humanism and hope. In films from 1955 to 1992, he portrayed this humanism as a unique creative force. He was a writer, director, illustrator, producer, lyricist, scriptwriter, choreographer, music composer, graphic designer, and filmmaker. Mr. Ray directed 36 films, including 29 feature films, 10 documentaries, and short films in his career. As a director, Ray was noted for humanity, his versatility, and his detailed control over his films and their music. Satyajit Ray was an extraordinarily diverse talent. He wrote his own screenplay frequently based on stories he had written. A talented graphic artist, he sketched out his own storyboards and even designed promotional posters for the finished film. He opted and edited his own films and composed his own films scores. The success of his first film, Pather Panchali, gave Ray total control over his subsequent films. What followed was a long career as a world-class filmmaker. Until 1981, he could make a feature-length film every year. His first film, Pather Panchali, won 11 international prizes, including the inaugural Best Human Document Award at the 1956 Cannes Film Festival. He got 36 National Film Awards by the Government of India and award at International Film Festival. He was awarded the Golden Lion Honorary Award in 1982 for Aparajita 1996. That same year, he received an honorary Homage A. Satyajit Ray Award at the 1982 Cannes Film Festival. After Charlie Chaplin, Satyajit Ray is the second film personality who have been awarded an honorary doctorate by Oxford University. He was awarded the Dadasaheb Phalke Award in 1965. Government of India awarded him the Padma Bhushan in 1965. After his death, he honored by Bharat Ratna.
এই পার্টটাকে ছেড়ে দাও, কি অ্যাওয়ার্ড পেয়েছে আমার দরকার হিউম্যানিজম ও হিউম্যানিজম এটা আমাদের ছাত্র হ্যাঁ কত অ্যাওয়ার্ড পেয়েছে এই পেয়েছে ডিসপ্লে বাদ দিয়ে দাও চলে যাও
These three films are togetherly named Opu Trilogy. With this Opu Trilogy, Satyajit Ray shown us the life story of Opu Purata. In the first movie, Pathir Panchali, Opu, his elder sister Durga, his mother, father, and his auntie, how lived in a small village. It shows what difficult problems the poor family has to face. In the second movie, Aparajito, Opu and his parents moved the Benares and there they started living. They show how many more problems they had to face their job, Opu's wedding scenes, and the love of their husband. And the third movie in Opu Samsar shows Opu living in Kolkata and what he has to do to find a job, Opu's wedding scenes, and the love between their husband and wife. Here, Satyajit Ray has presented a simple life story in an extraordinary way, from where he showed how to fight without losing. Mr. Ray wants to inspire people to move forward by solving every problem in life through this movie. Satyajit Ray, portrayal of Udayan Pandit as a school teacher in Hirak Raja Deshe cinema is an ideal humanitarian character. The war he was declared against corruption here has given rise to a positive outlook on society. The heroes of that movie, Stuti and Bagha, stay at side of truth to help him. The story of a teacher and his college years introduces an idealistic mentality here. The film tells the story of how they fought and ended the rule of the oppressive ruler, brought freedom and made the people happy. Ray's personal struggle for the collective good was most of the time. Once he said, I am an activist as an artist, that's my goal. The path of art as activism was recognized and celebrated by the United Nations, the exhibition, The Transforming Power of Industry. Almost 23 years after Ray's days as an agent of industrial. Satyajit Ray died in Kolkata on 23rd April 1992. He was the first Oscar winner in independent India. After receiving an Oscar from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science for lifetime achievement, Satyajit Ray was an artist who did not need the help of to make national reputation. Easy layers were established with the enormous budget needed to produce a blockbuster. He was one of the most acclaimed filmmakers of the 20th century. Satyajit Ray is a cultural icon not only in this country but also abroad. Today, every Indian remembers the name of this great man with reverence. Tribute to Satyajit Ray on his birth century. Maharaja Prakash.
Please speak to the subject, it will be nice. Okay? If there is others, you can skip it. Okay?
Sir,
I have my paper documented in a bulletin form. I try to be as short as possible.
Yeah, thank you.
First and foremost, we are all very tired throughout the day, so I'll not go into formalities. And just one little line, I have to track cases because for young scholars like us, the platform that cases create, I am, as an eccentric, crazy Jewish, I've got the platform to present crazy ideas such as ghost, dakat, and now I am here to present Peluna Tours and Travels, Bengali fiction travel writing. So, keeping under the umbrella topic of humanism, I'm Satyajit Ray. I have felt through all of Ray's work, be it films, or I've spoken a lot about films, or be it literature, or be it graphic narration, journalism, whatever Ray has touched, he has an essence of travel in it. He himself was an aggressive traveler right from the young age. We have seen his interviews, we have seen his several accounts, and he has himself professed his love for travel more than once. But moreover, what he has done is, other than professing his love for travel, he has weaved his idea of travel
the idea of humanism that he had inherited from the golden Renaissance, which is not, I feel, is not like any other Renaissance of any other part of the world. The Indian Bengali Renaissance, he was a child of it, and he has weaved this idea of travel, desire for travel, and the humanistic connection that travel brings, connects. That is what he weaved into all of his work. And here I am trying to focus on the fact that perhaps Satyajit Ray, without declaring himself to be one of the most pioneers. I know people will ask, what about Shrikant Walker? But specifically, Ray was one of the clear pioneers of fictional travel writing. Through detective stories, he was a fictional travel writer, and his entire Feluda series exclusively also serves as a complete work of travel writing, travelogue as well. I'll try to prove my point by going through some examples. I submitted my paper to the organization. Here I will not read it out, but trying to go through the important points that I felt might prove my point. First and foremost, the basic tenets of travel writing include where you will stay, what you will eat, how you will reach that place, where to find the established monuments or historical points, and the history of the place. These five things make a writing a travel writing. Satyajit Ray in Feluda, through Pokshe, has brought forward all of these tenets. If you try to read one of his novels before visiting a particular place in Bengal or in India, you are going to find a complete rounded travel plan for you, which is still relevant given in the contemporary era. We have a common idea that Bengalis love to travel. Bangali Paya Tolay Shosh. এবং যেখানেই যাওয়া হোক, wherever we visit, be it abroad or be it around India, be it a short trip to Shantiniketan, be it a car drive to suppose Hazaribagh, or be it to Kashmir, be it to Rajasthan, be it to Khajuraho, wherever you visit, you will find a Feluda story. Feluda, that is how I mentioned that this is how Feluda's work is a travel writing, and it stands for itself because it is distinctively different from Byomkesh. It is different from his other work, Shonku, and it is also different from Kariniku. How is that happening? First and foremost, for Byomkesh, his stories are mostly based around Kolkata. He travels for like Durgarahosho or many other places. He does travel, but most of his stories are different. Be it Sherlock Holmes, we get to know London from his work. Be it Professor Shonku, once again raised love for travel. He has traveled around the world, is incorporating a lot of traveling aspect in Shonku, but the fact that it is out of reach, we people, I don't know how it is possible, or even if it is today possible for Madhyabitto clan, which I don't feel is the middle class exact translation in English. The Madhyabitto clan is not still acquainted with outside world. Bengalis love to travel, but how many of us have had the opportunity or the privilege to have traveled abroad? We haven't. So Shonku is traveling mostly worldwide, which is a little less connecting or a little less hard to believe given his scientific explorations, which are probably a little out of the place. So it is not really hard to accept or find it realistic at certain times. So the connection is a little less compared to Feluda. And on the other hand, Tarini Khudo is also largely based on the idea of fiction writing. His ideas are incorporating ghosts, his ideas are incorporating kings and whatnot. He is practicing frame narrative. Tarini Khudo is always telling stories to his nephew's children. So what is connecting Feluda more to it is, it is very hard to find anything unrealistic or unworldly happening in Feluda stories. If you and me travel today, the things that can happen to us are happening to Lalmohan Babu Kopshe and Feluda most of the time. Once again, role of Lalmohan Ganguly is extremely important when it comes to establishing the fact that Feluda is also a country of travels, because Ray has created this idea of Lalmohan Ganguly being a quirky, unprepared traveler who loves to travel. And Feluda, on the other hand, he is exactly the opposite. He is well informed, and Lalmohan Babu's quirks are basically every common paper.
So if you land up in Ladakh and see a man inappropriately dressed in cold weather clothes, you will know that somewhat like a Pakistani kind of situation has happened. Because just like Lamut Babu, very hardly there was this practice of reading up. Non-academic people, before traveling to a certain travel destination, did not read up a lot about it. Feluda was created right before a case. What did Feluda do? Feluda traveled to Shiddu Jatha. He had an immense knowledge about the place, so Feluda studied about the history of the place. After that, Feluda asked who should study about the history. After that, Feluda corrected all sort of mishaps that Rajendra came up with that Russian, and that is beautifully weaved into the narrative structure of all the novels, be it Koila Shikalankari or any other text that Ray has constructed. Other than this multi-layering effect is also an important tenet of humanism, but traveling. Humanism has been promoted by many large scholars, enigmatic figures in the world, but all of them have something in common that they have traveled. Sir has presented a beautiful paper right before. Ruth Harris, Miss Ruth Harris has presented Vivekananda. He himself was a traveler. Whoever has reached the heights of success in Bengal Renaissance or be it Bengal, this tenet of travel is always present in it. And Ray has highlighted this in all of his works, as I have said before. Not only that, what I plan to say through this paper was this: Ray has passed, but he has not passed from the present-day contemporary lives of Bengalis. Even today, before traveling to, for example, Benares, if you do not read up Joy Baba film, if you do not watch the film, you are missing out on the wholesome experience of Varanasi. If you are visiting South Kolkata cafes, if you're visiting Abar Beach, you will not enjoy half as much with the coffee if you have not visited the hearts of Benares and if you have not read up your coffee. Not only this, I will speak about a little bit about personal experience, which is not exclusive to me. Anyone who has traveled to Jaisalmer and is an hour of elephant ride have of course traveled to Chunarkela. This has happened to me when I traveled to Chunarkela as a school kid. I was very excited to visit Chunarkela. And like many other Bengalis, my father Hindi was not all appropriate for Mashallah Babu. So with a beautiful accent, Baba asked an auto rickshaw driver there that Sune ka killa kahan hai? And after this, the auto rickshaw driver turned his head, and I can assure you he doesn't have any knowledge of reading or writing. He turned and said, Chunarkela doesn't know. First and foremost, I found the success of Ray there. Ray had not only established the fact that Bengali and travelers, he has also established the fact that you do not need a language, an agency on the language, or the origin. If you can reach out, if you have a humanistic approach, and if you have the love for travel, your works will reach the ground level where this man, an auto rickshaw driver, probably has not watched Satyajit Ray's films, has not read Satyajit Ray's works, but this person is earning a big buck from Bengali travelers by taking them specially to Satyajit Ray's films. This is also the case in case of Manmohan in Vietnam, where Feluda actually captures Wilcox's character. And Kachori Bali has destructively shot where this film was shot about Feluda. And he has a picture of Satyajit Ray out there, and you will get a special discount for a rate covered and enter in the shop. This is I have experienced this particularly. Not only this, right now this is an ongoing procedure. What Ray has sown in the soil of Bengal has flourished itself largely, and that is why the works that are still being made on him, I will not exactly the word films made on his I or his work, because every translation work is independently a work in itself. So the translations been made on Ray by Srilin Mukherjee, Shoni Rai, and many other cases, including the OTT platforms that have been popularized much larger banner under the large banner of popularity after the pandemic. So post-pandemic India is more expensive with the OTT platforms. Here we have enigmatic ways
many of Netflix's heavy work, such as Stranger Things and all that. I'm not comparing, I'm not saying Stranger Things is more popular, but what I'm trying to say is great. Government a collection of short films made on utilized work have also created a great impact. And not only that, this particular work has also important tenets of traveling, where a beautiful cinematography has been incorporated in shooting of this documentary. The documentary is a collection of short films in the photography. And extensive art-loving skills of his design have also created a great impact on his travel aspects. And he has taken the Bengali reader or any reader of translation of Bengal to places where you can finally get the touch of the place, all around the touch. Be Darjeeling, I'm waiting in one of places like the others or Darjeeling, and he has created a wholesome experience. You want to know about what to eat, so she will give you what he's eating for breakfast or what he's having on the train. He will give extensive details about the travel. He will also tell you what trains to connect from hotels to stay. How the experience is not as written in the books, how it is not practical at certain times, or where the real life experience is different. So if Bengalis are looked, real others are looked. Children's rights work, graphic passion done by Anand Publishers right now. Anand Mala has a work of graphic passions of children's rights with the works. Have beautiful visualization of travel destinations. Pirugal himself was a brilliant person in different ways, also in sketching. So he has picturized his friends such as he has picturized the travel places, and he has also given detailed explanations of each and every travel place. So therefore, I would like to conclude my time set. So I would like to conclude by saying that I am claiming through this paper, not really claiming or trying to prove through this paper that the series stand alone as a complete work of travel fiction writing in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll skip those which have been said by him, those which have been taken by her, and I'll just concentrate on some. Yeah, some ideas on. Sure. First is thanks to you. It's very original idea, very original idea. But I must share with you.
Sir, we are present and we have a paper.
Is not fictitious. It is taken from a gentleman, and that is my father. My father is actually Shitujata. You can Google him later. Nirmal Chandra Kumar, Shitujata. There has been. No. There are two large articles in this centenary. One was in Anandabajar, and one was in Sambad Pratidin, and there was also in Doordarshan. There was an article on it. Okay, so it is not fictitious actually, but that we will talk later. Okay. First is I will skip those parts because you need to connect the Renaissance movement, etc., with the current, with Satyajit Ray and the others, which I am skipping completely because some of it has been done and all that, and it will take a much longer time. So I straight away I come to this part on Ray. Okay. So coming to that, keeping in with the theme of the legacy of Satyajit Ray in cinema and art history, Renaissance, let us elucidate the legacy of Satyajit Ray. I'm just coming to that part later. First is Renaissance brought man to the center of attention. Before the Renaissance, man merely was a product of oppression. Okay, and the Renaissance freed man from this intellectual slavery. Okay, portrayed him as one who shapes his own destiny. I take control of my mind and I do. Okay, the answer is that there are artists portraying hope and humanism. this portion of your skill development where you have a copy of Leonardo da Vinci, which he has mentioned, Eckhart has mentioned. I am not going into because that is one part of it. That you are multifaceted. You know a lot of skills. That is a part of Renaissance. Okay, that is one part of the Renaissance. But the bigger part, which is our theme and which we are dealing with actually, is of humanism. That can an artist bring in humanism in his work, be it sculpture, be it literature, And what she was saying, like in travel, it is very important. Like a Renaissance man needs to travel, not only travel, which she is saying, in different places, but travel in mind. Okay? And the biggest example is there is an article in Telegraph which came out last 2-3 months back on my father, who has never traveled, but he traveled in his mind. He is the biggest example of a man who never went out of his house. And I was very flabbergasted because I didn't know what he did. What did my father do? Whole day, this man, he sat in his library of 1 lakh books in my house. He rummaged through maps, prints, and everything. In the evening, his friend came to be tried, Nirmalendu Chaudhary. Many do not know that Nirmalendu Chaudhary was also a friend of Chaudhary. Mrinal Sen and all, they came for Adda. And my mother cooked good foods for them. And here was a man who just sat over there and never went out of his house. So I went in Don Bosco school. You have this session when you were in class 4, 5, you are called, come up here and say 10 lines on your father. I didn't know what to say. What does my father do? So what I would go over there and say is that my father is a professor. Because that is the best image that I could come to. Okay? So these are the kind of Renaissance men. Is completely a man of that. So I'm saying that I agree with you. He's of travel, but also travel in your mind. My father knew 14 languages. Where did he learn? He knew so many subjects, anthropology, this. And that is why he's compared with Nidhu Data, because the other characters who come in, they are linear. Some say he's taken from Radha Prasad Gupta. But Radha Prasad Gupta was an Anglophile and one subject. My father was in botany. He was fond of Roxburgh. He was fond of Wallenstein. He was into history. He was into literature. He was into Latin. In fact, for long, there is a book over there in my house which I thought was a Bible. But much later, I came to know that this huge tome of a thing is actually a Latin prayer book which my father read every morning. But that is my father. I'm not going into it. I just wanted to mention that what is the kind of man you created that. Satyajit Ray was a man. I'm not reading from here anymore. I'm just telling you things which I experienced. And I started writing on him. I am very dividend, of publishing things and all that. But if I'm encouraged a lot, I may also publish it. I thought of doing it today also. I have my own diary on Twitter. Or dated. That Manikaka ki korlo ki korlo. The first one is an introduction, which I wrote to him where I compared him with Mount Kanchenjunga. He was such serene. And like when I used to visit him, and he used to treat me like an adult. And that is what gave me always. I told your father that I will be going tomorrow. He can wait. But I know immediately he has to send the book to me. But let me share with you that I like it, because if I didn't get that book, the whole night I would be thinking of this. People do not know that it took Satranj Ki Khiladi 20 years to make. Many people do not know that. And he researched and researched and researched. And for that only, my father bought from Sotheby's a Mutiny scrapbook, which I still have. It is from the Fort William, one colonel. He has taken out from dustbin papers which are not British papers, and he has kept those cuttings. And if you go through the scrapbook, you will see that the report which is there of mutiny of Vincent Smith and the others are all wrong. Because these are Austrian papers, these are German papers, Hungarian papers. They are reporting completely different. And this one he purchased at that time for 100 pounds for Satyajit Ray. And this is Ray. For making of the Shatranj Ki Khilari, it is not only that he read Munshi Premchand, the book and all that. In fact, it was his Mamar Bari, the Shen Bari, where he used to go in Lucknow every winter with his mother. There in A.H. Wheeler, he bought one book of Munshi Premchand short story. And it is from there he got the idea that he got it. And for 20 years, this went on research, not only on mutiny. In fact, I still have it, the original Quran of Wajid Ali Shah is in my house, which my father got, because Ray was making a movie and he wanted to see it. Can you imagine? This is an NSO man. He's going to make a movie of mutiny, but he's going to read everything. My father got a map for him on the position of the troops on 15th May 1857, the day that it broke out. The mutiny broke out. So it is not only that, he studied everything. He studied huge amount of things only to make that movie. For 20 years he studied every aspect. He saw engravings of Havell and others just to get a feel of what he's, but he didn't show it over there. In fact, he regretted to my father that had I got a good character, I would have used that Quran, you know that. And the character was the mother of Wajid Ali Shah. He did not get the right character. That is why she is not shown. She is shown as Parda Nasi, was behind the curtain. If he would have got a character, right character, then he would have shown and that Quran would have also come. Incidentally, the character which I told him later, who I felt, well, you know, because my father died before Shatranj was released, I told him at that time I was working in Anandbajar Putrika and my editor was Mansur Ali Khan Pataudi for Sports World. And I went to his house, I met the Begum of Bhopal, that is Mansur Ali Khan's mother. And I think she would have suited that character. And I told Mani, Yami Pegi Jamato, Ish, Agi Pilamna, into Amikoto Milake Janto. Into his Boyvari, they took 10 Duple Road, Delhi, they would have met her. Because in 10 Duple, whenever you went to that house, you had to meet the mother. That was the custom. That is how I came to know her. Ish, what a miss. I mean, just imagine, this is a Renaissance man. You see the kind of a vista that they can make. It is 70 millimeter vista that they will think. It takes 20 years in the making. 20 years in the making. Please go and see. I still have materials from Shatranj. I was approached by Jindal to sell it to him because he's got a collection of things because he produced. I don't want to give him. I have got Lord Uttram's sword. I have got pistols. I have got pandan. I have got many things in that. But all of them have not been used. This is an NSO man. He will study everything. Okay. Another instance I will give you in Kanchenjunga. I think you mentioned. In Kanchenjunga, there is a scene where Pahari, he comes out and he is bird lover and there is a book, birds of, but actually, Satyajit Ray, he studied not only bird sounds. And there is a book called The Birds of Darjeeling. Actually, there is a book. And it is still in my house. I have kept it. All these things I have not given up. There is a book called Birds of Darjeeling. But the book is actually in octavo size. And the cover is not very attractive. It is of green. And he studied all sounds. He knew the birds' sounds. Just imagine. This is a Renaissance man. And you have seen that scene. Akbar Khali Awaz for that, he studied actually the birds of Darjeeling what are their sounds and everything is that. And to that detail, when the day that he was going to Darjeeling to catch the train in Sialda, it came in his mind that this book is very unattractive. So Pahari Sandar jokhon asbe boita niye, it is a very unattractive book. How will people know that he's actually a bird lover and looking at a bird book? And this is going in his mind. Mind you, this is a Renaissance. He came to my home and then he told my father, "No, কি হয়েছে এই বইটা তো এরকম একটা হাতে দেবে কিরাম একটা হচ্ছে কিন্তু আমি বই তো তৈরি করেনি you know many of the books which you see in his film are actually made by him. They're dummy copies, and the binder who has made it, his name is Narayan Babu. He's one of the world famous binder. During lockdown he was affected by COVID. He has gone to Mumbai. He has gone away to his daughter's place. The daughter has taken him away. He used to stay in Rajabajar. Narayan Babu. Narayan Babu he used to be called. And Manik Kaka used to say that you bake the book like this, a size and corvette. So that in the film, when you are seeing it, you will see it in different size. Actually, dummy kore dito, jeram chaito, eram binding hobe, ei hobe, toi hobe, gold hobe, ei hobe. This is a Renaissance. Even in one of Tinkonda, I remember, in Tinkonda there is a scene, যেখানে he lights a cigarette. একটা cigarette light করবে অন্ধকারের মধ্যে. And he had taken that shot. He came home, he was not happy. You know why? যে দেশলাইটা ছিল সেটা মডার্ন দেশলাই ছিল. এইটা মানিকা মাথায়. And then he got in touch with my father. My father could not give him. There is a gentleman called Porimal Rai. He's still alive. Porimal Rai. He collected matchboxes. And he gave the original matchboxes, and this thing was not reshot. In the same way, like when he came to my father, what is the big thing? Why? He wrote another book, Birds of India by Selim Ali. Oh, by Selim Ali, what did he use for? Birds of Darjeeling, not necessarily, nah. Birds of India, Selim Ali, everybody knows. He was so happy. দেখেছেন তো এই জন্য আমি আপনার কাছে আসি আমি ট্রেন ধরতে যাচ্ছি পরে এসে কথা বলবো and he had a recorder আমি দেখছি একটা রেকর্ডার নিয়ে ঘুরছে আপনি পাখির আওয়াজ সব রেকর্ড করবে এই করবে that is a reason. And for what 2 minutes to 3 minutes in the film only that was. This is the big thing about it. How much detail you can go at, what level you can work, and how you can get your this thing involved. And today we were seeing this thing, you know, I just spoke from there without taking the permission of the chairperson then, that about Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Washington Chaudhary was very eager to play Raja Ram Mohan Roy. And he was a friend of my father. He was very proud. He came back to my Baba বলল ঠিক আছে and he was an unknown director নামটা ভুলে গেছি unknown director so he told বসন্ত why don't you just tell him বলে সে কি হয় তখন he is a matinee idol কত চেহারা কি কি হয় কুমার বাবু আপনি বুঝতে পারছেন না my father said yes I can understand but somehow he got the role. That day he came running and told my father and the work started on making of Raja Ram Mohan. The original shawl Raja Ram Mohan used to wear at Dera, 1.5 size of a shawl. It was used to hang here. It is called as Dera shawl. My father got a Dera shawl and the original shawl. This was got, and then ultimately I have given it to Bristol away because it was fading away. I gave it away. In the same way, he got letters. But what is most interesting, that one of the scene he has to, I think it is in Benares where he has to do Mostok Mundan. And he has to, and Vasant Kapoor refused. He's the matinee idol, ওখানে মাথা নেড়া করে এখন টলিগঞ্জে যাবে হয় না So then my father tried to explain যে এত সুন্দর পাঠ হলো এই হলো না they do it very well খুব সুন্দর মেকআপ করে দেয় My father actually was in a country then Next day, Manik Kaka came. And my father told this story. So Manik Kaka said, when is Basanta coming? Next. Every day he used to come. He used to go to Hillary Institute for theatre. My house was in Taltola and this was Hillary Institute in Shialda. He used to go through my home. Every day he used to come. So next day what happened, when Basanta Kaku came, Manik Kaka also came. And then Mullah Jari, I heard, it's a great film. You are made and everything and all that. Kintu, I think there is one scene left. And you are not agreeing? Mata, then it is Manik Kaka who explained to Basanta that we must do that for realism. This is a Renaissance man. These are examples. And he explained to him. And then he suggested that don't go to Tollywood. Studio যাবার দরকার নেই, take a holiday. বলে আমি তো প্রত্যেক শুটিং এর পরে শেষ হয়ে গেলে আমি ছুটিতে চলে যাব। বাড়িতে বসে থাকার দরকার নেই। নালে কোন লোকের কাছে আসো বসে থাকো। And actually you see the slowly, if you see the film, actually, when we think of Raja Ram Mohan in real life, we actually always in our mind we think of that film as Raja Ram Mohan. As Basanta. True. In fact, Basanta Kaku, slowly I saw him turning into Raja Ram Mohan. In my own home, I saw. I don't think there is much time now. I just thought that instead of reading a paper and a theoretical and what is there, I will share with you my personal this thing. And another thing with that I will end. Many people have visited him and they know his house also. It is of a wooden staircase. If you go up, and he will always open it. Always. He will talk to you, and when you are coming, he will again come to them. And he will wait over there to hear your footsteps ending. So stop, all that. How you know he was waiting? Because in the last when you go, he will tuck that real lock, the door will close. That is a Renaissance man. That is a Renaissance man. See, the respecting it to people. He has done it with me as a young lad. And what respect used to give. When I used to take the book to him and all that, he had a Mora chilo. The Mora thake ene amake boste bolbe. Tarpore ei korbe. He has given me small drawing as reward. I have kept all of this in my diary. That is why when there was an exhibition of the 100 years of Charlie Chaplin in London, and they were fumbling. It is Manik Kaka who told them, then he rang me up and said, they don't give anything in original. I have posters and everything. তারপরে আমাকে বলছে দেবেন অরিজিনাল কিন্তু দিও না, কোথায় চলে যাবে লন্ডন থেকে। ওরা তো গিয়ে বলবে সত্যজিৎ রায় বলেছে, তুমি তো বার করে দিয়ে দেবো উধার করে। আমি তখন বললাম তাহলে কি করবো, ছবি তুলে দিয়ে। And that is what happened. But they were stuck because they wanted to bring out a book. And the cover of the book, they wanted, actually Satyajit Ray is very fond of Charlie Chaplin, and you know, they wanted him to draw, but they did not have the courage to come and ask him. If they would have asked, he would have done it. Then, because I had given all those posters, I was part of the team. Then they asked me, I said, so what I did, I went to him, and immediately that book is still with me. And then I went, I got the water and all that, he dipped it, at the stage. I'll end with that. Because these are great men, let me share with you. These are actually Renaissance men who had great values of things of what they do. They do not see that this is Edinburgh and this is Kurusoa or this is Alok Kumar. It is not. Treatment of people and what they did, and is of equal distinct, and that is what I learned. The respect they gave to my mother, I could understand that these are people of different caliber in nature. The respect they gave. কখনো তো ভাবতো না যে হ্যাঁ বাড়িতে আছে না, যদিও আমার বাবা বলতেন যে আমার my wife Kuruna is much more educated than me, but in paper it was true because she had done 2 masters and everything. But that aside, but the respect they gave, and when they went, they always said they to call her. আমি ভেতর থেকে ডেকে দিতাম, ঠিক খেয়েছে, ভালো করে খেয়েছি, ভালো এনজয় করলাম, চাটা ভালো ছিল। বসন্ত চৌধুরী's cup was different. It is made in China. And because he used to smoke, it used to take long time for him to drink that tea. সেই জন্য বাবা একটা কাপ জোগাড় করেছিল, চায়না টিভি কভার, আর কভারে একটা গর্ত আছে যাতে পেপারটা চলে যেতে পারে। one of his favorite fish was তোপসে মাছ। তোপসে মাছ বেসন দিয়ে আমার মা তৈরি করে আমি দিয়ে আসতাম বাড়িতে। একটা 15-র সময় চান করে খেতে বসতাম প্রত্যেকদিন। ওই সময় আমাকে দিয়ে আমি নিয়ে যেতাম, and that was half fried. ওখানে আরেকবার হ্যাঁ গরম করে আরেকবার করে স্টাফ। Thank you so much. আচ্ছা, any questions at all?